Today we're taking a look back at one of my favorite games for the Super Nintendo, The Illusion of Gaia, or as it was known in Australia and Europe, The Illusion of Time. Sadly, when it was released on the Super Nintendo, it really didn't get the attention it deserves. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I found this game really difficult when I first got it. I was around the age of 6 or 7, and I actually didn't complete the game until I was in middle school. I found it that difficult. In retrospective, though, it's not really that hard. However, there is a reason I picked The Illusion of Gaia as the game I wanted to take a look back at. I found it to be an amazing experience from start to finish. Never at one point throughout the game did I actually find myself bored. But before we talk about why that is, let's take a little look at the history behind the game. Developed by a company that went by the name of Quintet, The Illusion of Gaia was originally released in Japan in 1993. It went by the name of Gaia Gensoki, which literally translates to The Fantasy Chronicles of Gaia. So, does the name Quintet sound familiar to you? Well, if it does, it makes sense because chances are you've played other games developed by them. What a lot of people don't know is that The Illusion of Gaia is actually part of a trilogy of games all developed by Quintet. Although none of the games are technically connected with the story and the characters, The Illusion of Gaia is actually part of the Soul Blazer trilogy. The Soul Blazer games were all action RPGs released for the Super Nintendo, with Soul Blazer being the first released, The Illusion of Gaia second, and then finally Terranigma being released last. Like The Illusion of Gaia, neither Soul Blazer or Terranigma really got a lot of attention on release. I actually didn't play either of these games until a few years ago. Now, let's talk about some names you probably do recognize. Nintendo and Enix were responsible for publishing the game. The game was first released in Japan and published by Enix. However, since the game received a later release date in the rest of the world, Nintendo handled the publishing outside of Japan. Of course, we all know the name Nintendo, but does the name Enix sound familiar? Well, it should. In 2003, Enix merged with the company Square, and together they became Square Enix. But that's enough about the history of The Illusion of Gaia. Let's actually talk about the game itself. The game starts in the peaceful seaside town of South Cape. You play as a young teenager named Will. A few years ago, Will went on an expedition with his father. However, something went terribly wrong, and Will managed to make his way back to South Cape, but his father never returned. Will is now living peacefully in the town of South Cape with his grandparents and friends. But one day he accidentally comes across a mysterious area called the Dark Space that only he can enter for some reason. In this dark space, he meets a creature named Gaia. Gaia tells him that something terrible is going to happen to the world, and it's up to Will to save the Earth from an approaching comet. This comet is said to bring terrible devastation to the planet, and this is where Will's journey begins. Okay, I get it. Not necessarily the most interesting plot line in an action RPG, I'll admit it. However, what sets The Illusion of Gaia apart from other games is the fact the game world is actually based on our very own planet Earth. Although we don't necessarily know when the game takes place, it's widely accepted that The Illusion of Gaia probably takes place during the Age of Exploration, also known as the 16th century. We have this rough idea of the time period because at one point during the game, Will is stranded at sea and passes out. When he's found by a certain NPC, the NPC mentions Christopher Columbus and how his crew contracted scurvy from lack of vitamin C during their sea travels. Also, there are several mentions throughout the game of people searching the Earth for ancient ruins and treasures, and together this makes sense the game would take place during the Age of Exploration. Now that we have a rough time period in which the game takes place, let's talk about some of the places we get to actually visit. Some of the places Will explores on his journey are the Incan ruins, the Nazca Lines, the Lost Continent Amu, the Great Wall of China, and even Angkor Wat. What's really interesting and fun about this is the fact that many of these locations serve as dungeons for the game. Now that we've mentioned the dungeons, let's actually talk about the gameplay mechanics. As I stated earlier, The Illusion of Gaia is an action RPG, and being such, it really doesn't deviate too much from the expected formula for this genre of games. A lot of people like to compare it to how the Legend of Zelda games play, and rightfully so. It really doesn't deviate too much from that formula. You have your health points on the top of the screen. When you lose all your health points, you die, right? Well, here's where things are a little bit different. When you kill enemies in the game, they drop gems. You collect 100 gems, you gain a respawn point. You can have up to 9 respawn points. So when you die, if you have a respawn point, you can actually respawn to an area closer to where you are than the last save point. Sadly, you can't choose where you want to put these respawn points, but they can be a potential time saver if you don't want to go back to your last save point. Since we just discussed the health mechanics, let's talk about your stats. You have 3 upgradable stats in the game. Obviously, one is your health, the next is strength, and the final one is defense. What's different about the Illusion of Gaia is the fact you don't improve these stats by equipping different armor or weapons or collecting experience points. To improve your stats, you have to defeat all the enemies in a certain area of a dungeon. After all the enemies are defeated, you are awarded an increase in health, strength, or defense. I actually really like this mechanic because it encourages the player to explore every area of a particular dungeon instead of just trying to blaze through it real fast. However, if you want an extra challenge, you can clear the dungeon without killing all the enemies, thus getting no improvement to your stats. However, if you're going for a low stat run, you might be in trouble if you change your mind later. There are some areas you cannot go back to, so if you miss enemies and don't get your stat increase, well, I guess you're out of luck. We already know that the main character of the game is Will, and although he is technically the only playable character in the game, he does have a very unique ability. In certain areas, Will can enter the dark space with Gaia, and take on a different form. For most of the game, the only other form Will can take on is that of Frieden, a Dark Knight. However, very late in the game, and we're talking very late, Will also gains the ability to take on the form of Shadow, a being of pure energy. Each of Will's forms have certain abilities and weapons that can't be used in any other form, thus making it necessary to take on a certain form to progress through a certain area of a dungeon. Will's base form uses his flute as a weapon. Yes, a flute, I know. But he also gains the ability to slide under walls and charge up energy to break walls and statues. Frieden uses a sword as his weapon. It has a longer range than Will's flute, making it possible to reach certain switches that Will's base form cannot. Frieden can also learn to charge up balls of energy to shoot, and he can also summon a protective aura around him to damage enemies. Shadow is the most powerful form in the game. Although Frieden is technically more powerful than Will, Shadow is even more powerful than Frieden, thus making it really unnecessary to actually use Frieden again after Shadow is unlocked. Shadow also has probably the most useful ability in the game. He is able to melt into the ground. Now it doesn't sound like much, but this allows him to dodge enemies' attacks, which are previously impossible, or even slip through the ground to a lower level in a dungeon. With each of these different forms only being able to perform certain tasks, this makes for really interesting and at times puzzling dungeon mechanics. It actually works really well. We've talked about all of Will's forms, but what about other characters in the game? Now trust me, you will not be taking this grand adventure across the world on your own. Will has many travel companions that come and go as the story progresses. One of the first travel companions you meet is a spoiled and naive princess by the name of Kara. Although Kara is often causing trouble for Will, she's very good at heart. She only wishes to escape her life from the castle. She also has a pet pig named Hamlet, who we're not going to talk about because reasons. At certain points in the game, Will also travel along with his friends from South Cape. You have Seth, the smart one, Lance, the brave, hopeless romantic, and Eric, the brave at heart crybaby. There is also Lily, the flower girl, who's not from South Cape. She helps Will in many ways throughout the game, and eventually you'll come across Neil, Will's cousin, who's very strange but is also a talented inventor. Although Will is the only character you will control, there is definitely no shortage of companions to join you on your travels. Each one of them brings their own unique personality to the table, and I can honestly say I enjoyed having each of them with me. So what made this game so great to me? What makes it hold such a special place in my heart? Is it the epic boss fights? Or is it the unique and puzzling dungeons? Well, that's certainly part of it, and I'll admit, there is really nothing like going through the Sky Garden for the first time. It's such an amazing place, but there's something more with the game. For me, it's that sense of adventure of exploring a world based on our own. Yeah, there are a ton of games out there where you explore a world, discover new things, find treasures, whatever, but how many are based on our own Earth? The Illusion of Gaia really resonated with me as a child. Yes, I couldn't beat it when I was in elementary school, but in middle school, the game made me realize there's so much more out there. Just seeing the Great Wall of China, the Incan ruins, the Nazca lines, all based on real things. It inspired me to want to learn more about the world around me. So many times, we hear about how video games are a waste of time. Well, the Illusion of Gaia was not that way for me. It inspired me to want to research more about the world. I learned about the Great Wall of China, the Nazca lines, how much interesting history is behind them, all thanks to this game. And that's the amazing thing, for a child to be so awestruck by something they see in a game, to actually want to go out and do research on their own and learn more about it. I mean, that's why this game holds such a special place in my heart. If you've never played The Illusion of Gaia, I highly, highly, highly recommend doing so. You know, before making this video, I had planned just to speed through the game to get footage, but once again I found myself exploring every nook and cranny and talking to every NPC. This game hasn't lost any of its magic to me. I had just as much fun playing through this time as I have every other time. And I really do truly hope this game can bring the same sense of wonder to you as it has for me over the years. This has been a look back at The Illusion of Gaia for the Super Nintendo. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I really did truly enjoy making it.